So we know in Parsha Mishpatim, which is clearly a follow-up to the Parsha Yisro, and a lot that happened in Mishpatim is related, at least in terms of the end of the Parsha, of sort of recounting and giving us more details as to what took place by Mom and Har Sinai. And the statement of Klal Yisrael, which the Pasuk brings, is really one of the most famous and maybe represents the greatest level of clarity that a nation ever had in history. Because, of course, the words Nasa v'nishma were stated by Klal Yisrael, and these were words that ultimately became sort of a mantra of the pinnacle of clarity and the pinnacle of commitment that Klal Yisrael manifested at that time. That clearly was unique, and it stood out above amongst the nations. We know that the Gemara tells us that the Torah was offered to the other nations of the world. Their response was Maksiv Bey, what's written in the Torah. They represented, they showed some skepticism. They want to know, before you ask us to commit to a system of life that we're going to be committed to, we'd like to know what's in there. And of course, every time HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to each nation, gave them that which is the most difficult for them, and they basically said no, and Klal Yisrael said Nasa v'nishma. And the angels were, of course, the Gemara tells us, they were amazed by this. And there's a famous Gemara, Shiva Zatzal spoke about this Gemara, which is something that we have to try to really think about and aspire to in terms of reconnecting to that concept of Nasa v'nishma. Because Nasa v'nishma is something that really is somewhat misunderstood, or I should say something that's not appreciated, I should say, by the nations of the world, and maybe even by us, in terms of what it represents and what we have to try to sort of get ourselves back into a mindset of. Because the Gemara tells us in Shabbos that the Tzduki sees Rava, and the Tzduki is mocking Rava, because Rava is learning Torah, and he has this string that's wrapped around that somehow is connected to his body, and as he's sort of shuckling and emotionally involved in the learning, the string tightens on Rava's finger to the point that it's causing him to bleed, and he doesn't realize it. Rav is so deeply in thought and in analysis and Amel's Torah, completely goes right over his head, does not recognize what's going on. And says that Stuki to Rava, I'm a Paziza, you represent this impetuous nation, this nation that just does things quickly without thought, just like you're from them. Just like they put their they put the actions before their hearing. They said Nasa v'nishma. So you're doing the same thing. You're just jumping in without the nishma, without hearing and understanding. You're just jumping in with the nasa. So you're following the same sort of mode of impetuous behavior. You're not stopping to reflect what it is around you that's going on, and that's why you don't even realize that your finger is bleeding. Okay, we on the other hand, we represent thoughtful people. We're analytical, and we therefore our job is to, and that's what we said Maksiv Bey, and we would never do such a thing as say words like Nasa v'nishma. So here you see the Tzduki's perspective that this was an act of a weakness, and because how do you do that? How do you just jump in? And that same jumping in that they did, you have the same DNA to sort of do the same thing, and that's why you don't realize that your finger is bleeding. To which Rabbi gives the answer, which we have to think about, because again, even though one can argue that Klal Yisrael's Nasa v'nishma didn't stay that long, we had the Egel soon after, and clearly you can argue that we lost that madreg of Nasa v'nishma, but we have it. It is in our DNA. And Rabbi's answer was, no, you don't understand. It's the Tumas Yisharim Tanchem. It's the completeness and the simplicity, which is really not a simplicity, again, in a negative way, but the wholeness and the pureness of our nation to be able to trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's what allowed us to say Nasa v'nishma. It's not a fault. It's a virtue. It's a fact that we had this trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the only way you can have trust, what Rashi was masbir, is that when you have that purity in your own soul, then you can reflect that purity onto HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is giving you the Torah. And you recognize that, yes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the master of the world, who is kulei chesed, who has nothing but our best interests at heart. When he gives us the Torah, we're going to say maksiv. So you have to have that trust. You have to have that ability to perceive purity and wholeness and truth, and then you can embrace it without any qualifications and without any preconditions. To have preconditions is the very manifestation of not having that trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we had it, and we knew who the Torah was being given by. We knew where it was coming from, so we jumped on it. But you, on the other hand, no, Selef Risham Yishodem, I think the pasuk says that no, it's and the treacherous, they get destroyed in their own treachery. You couldn't perceive it, says Rava to the Tzduki, because of your hypocritical, mixed up black world that you live in, where you can't accept the truth. You don't have that purity of heart to have that trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because again, you have to have that trust. You have to have that wholeness inside. If you don't have that wholeness inside, you're not the Tumas Yisharim. You're not a Yashar. You'll never be able to perceive our relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, for you, it's impetuous. For you, it's superficial. But for us, it's just the opposite. It's a representation of us recognizing and knowing who HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. And when you know who is giving you this Torah, then you jump in, you say Nasa v'nishma. It becomes a virtuous thing that the Malach Hashars were flabbergasted. Who gave these people this incredible insight to say Nasa v'nishma? Where did they get it from? So when you get to that level, and the Malach Hashars were amazed. How did we develop this sense of trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu? This readiness to jump in. It's not almost not human-like. It's angelic in a certain way, but we were able to have that because we had that DNA passed down from Avrohom Avinu through the generations. That's Klal Yisrael. That's who we are. That's what we're able to do. And therefore, Torah is the same way. If we jump into the Torah, and again, there is a nishma connected to the nasa. It's not just that we act, but we act because we committed ourselves to that action because of the fact that we knew where it was coming from. We knew it was coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We had that love for him, that appreciation of his kulei chesed, his yud gimel midos, kerachim v'chan. Then you can jump in. And Torah therefore has to be with that sort of same bitachon, with the same trust as Tumas Yishom Tantchem really has to guide our lives, not just in relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, obviously, to develop that bitachon that whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing for us is letav, and that he cares and he loves us and everything is for the good, but also in our learning of the Torah, it's the same type of attitude. If you're always questioning and you sort of don't have that trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then that cynical part of what could come up in a person sort of starts, can creep in, and person starts questioning, and person starts wondering. That's the Yetzer Hara. That's the darkness within us. But if we keep focusing on who gave us the Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how much He loves us and how perfect He is, well then our jumping in terms of learning the Torah and the focus and the involvement we have in Torah would be Rava's involvement, where it's not an am of Paziza, it's an am with such love, and that's what we see. We see stories. I mean, again, you obviously can never lose your equilibrium to not know what's going on around you. We have to always be ready for chesed and for the other responsibilities, but to throw oneself into Torah with such total commitment and total emotional trust is something that again is a virtue. So Be'ez Hashem, if we can think about this Chazal and certainly the Shabbos when we read Nasa v'nishma, to try to reconnect to that level where the the Malach Hasharis were astounded that the Klai would have this relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that they would know where the Torah is coming from and be so ready to just completely throw themselves in. That's the kind of level that we need, Be'ez Hashem, to reconnect on the ultimate way with Bias Mashiach.